Hello, Fantasy Labbers. I am Brian. I am here with Matthew Friedman and Ian Hartitz. We are here to talk about NFL Week 8. Yeah. All right. These guys are up here. Thanks for joining us. We're here to talk Week 8. We have some injury concerns we're going to talk about. We're going to hit on all of the crazy weather for Week 8, which is really turning into the story of this slate. And then we'll answer some user questions. Thanks again for joining us. Looks like the chat is up and rolling already. All right, Ian, let's start off with the Cincinnati Bengals. I'll go ahead and share my screen as we start talking. We have some injury updates here with some of the guys that we haven't really seen play, John Ross specifically in. What's going on with their team this week?
Yeah, you said it, man. We're about to see the first kind of true game from John Ross, their top 10 pick this season. He played once earlier this year, but immediately missed the rest of their games up until now with his knee issues. So hopefully he's a little more full go this time around. But also Tyler Boyd and Cody Core are out for the Bengals. If you haven't heard of them, it makes sense. They're just backup receivers, but it is depth that's gone now and could give guys like Ross and LaFell just more snaps than they might otherwise be used to. We get this Colts defense that we know has been atrocious against the pass all season, but we've actually never seen them without their two best secondary players who are also out. Rashawn Melvin, their starting cornerback, is going to miss this game. Same with Malik Hooker, their first-round pick free safety. So got a full-strength Bengals offense finally going against the depleted Colts.
Yeah, Friedman, what are your thoughts on maybe the impact of Ross on A.J. Green? Obviously, his first game in the NFL, probably not going to really, hurt A.J. Green's outlook. But what are your thoughts on this offense now that we have all these injury updates going against the Colts? Obviously, these are going to be really popular players.
Yeah, I don't think Ross hurts A.J. Green at all. I don't know if he really especially helps him. The Colts are just so damaged in general. And then, as Ian mentioned, they're injured as well. Ross is a guy with legit deep speed, broke the combine record for 40 time. So it would not be surprising at all to see him get a long touchdown or something like that. So if you wanted to double stack him with Green and Dalton, I think that would be fine. Also, the running game, it's very much possible that the Colts give up a lot of points early on, and this turns into a Joe Mixon game too. So a lot of ways that you could stack this.
Yeah. And then like we've mentioned before on some of our other things, the Colts out two of their secondary pieces in Hooker and what's his name? Melvin. Yeah. All right, cool. Let's keep on moving.
One quick thing to add to this. This is one of the only fairly good weather games for this slate. So that's something else to keep in mind.
Yeah. Could make it even more popular for sure. All right, let's move to Detroit and let's talk about the Lions. Ian, Golden Tate, have we gotten final word on him?
Yeah, it's looking like he's going to be all set to play. We won't get final word till closer to 6, but he was able to practice all week and nothing but good reports coming out of there. And they'll need him because Kenny Galladay is still out with this hamstring issue. They were hoping the bye week could do him some good, but he's out, so we'll see T.J. Jones kind of sliding in as that number 3 receiver that doesn't have too large of a role. But this offense, it's a tough spot against this really good Steelers secondary we've seen all season, and the Lions are also missing their starting left tackle, Greg Robinson, who's been pretty terrible this season. But, I mean, if you can imagine how bad his backup probably is then. So, tough spot for the Lions.
Sure. Yeah, Matt, this game's out on the DraftKings main slate. It is on the FanDuel one. What are your thoughts on the Lions, pass game with Golden Tate? If he is playing, we have him projected at 0 to 1% ownership. We know the Steelers have limited big plays this year, but are any of these Lions guys in play?
I think they're in play. I think it won't take much to be slightly overweight on them in GPPs, and that could still have low ownership. And this is one of the 2 games in the slate that's being played in a dome. So ideal weather conditions. And so I think it's probably worth getting some exposure just for that reason alone, knowing that they will have low ownership. But for Golden Tate, not a particularly great matchup for him. He plays primarily in the slate, but no matter really where he lines up in the formation, he's going to be going against a defensive back who's pretty decent. So there's not a lot of kind of intrinsic reason to like him, but because of the slate and the situation, you don't have to go crazy and still be overweight on him.
Cool. All right, let's keep on moving here. Let's talk San Francisco 49ers. To the chagrin of Adam Levitan, we have Marquise Goodwin in. Ian, what's going on here?
Yeah, the wait for Lord Aldrich's going to have to go on a little bit longer. Marquise Goodwin had this midweek back issue. He was concussed last week, but guy's a trooper. He's going to be out there again. And he gets this Eagles secondary we've seen really give up a bunch of points to wide receivers over the last season and a half. And the Eagles are once again going to be without Ron Darby, their number one cornerback who hasn't played since the season opener. So definitely some spots for Goodwin and Garcon to potentially take advantage of. I will mention, too, that Trenton Brown, the 49ers starting right tackle, is out. I mean, we saw C.J. Beathard only put up 10 points on the Cowboys last week. So need to keep in mind it's a tough spot for the 49ers offense as a whole here.
Yeah, so this is an interesting game here. There's potentially some good plays on either side of this. We usually save questions here for the end of the show, but just because, it seems like 70% of our questions in chat right now are about the Eagles, and rightfully so. They destroyed this past Monday night. Carson Wentz looks amazing. Zach Ertz is in an interesting spot. Usually not a situation we want to target tight ends is against the 49ers, who are first in DVOA against tight ends, but it's Ertz, so maybe that doesn't matter. Freeman, what are your thoughts Sunday morning on this offense?
It's interesting. The big problem is the precipitation there. So right now in our models, we have, I believe, an 88% chance of precipitation kind of throughout the game. Projected wind speeds of close to 10 miles per hour, which is sort of like, it's not quite the danger zone, but it's getting close for quarterbacks. So it's not a great situation for the passing games there, even though both passing defenses are pretty atrocious. I think if I'm leaning anywhere in this game, and like I've said this before, I think it's a running game for the Eagles, especially if they get up big. I think it's a LeGarrette Blount type of game.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really intriguing, especially with low ownership. We would imagine that Wentz and Ertz and even Alshon and Aguilar are probably going to soak up a lot of ownership. So, Blount is definitely going to be maybe a contrarian boomer bust option. Ian, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I was about to say, I think this everything we're talking about is pointing towards Blount being the move. It sucks that Jason Peters, the Eagles left tackle's out. But I mean, this is still this 49ers defense that we haven't seen stop any running backs over the last two seasons. I believe the stat is David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, Kareem Hunt, and then whoever is playing the 49ers have been the top scoring running backs for the last season and a half. So if we can get Blount as a double-digit favorite where we're more likely to get those 15 carries a game we're looking for, good chance for touchdown equity, definitely like that Eagles run game.
Cool. Let's keep on moving. Actually, another game with some potential weather problems here. Let's start on the Washington side. We do have some injuries. Ian, we had talked earlier in the week that literally every player on the offensive line was injured and could potentially not play. So first question is, do we have some injury news on that one? And then, let's just sort of talk about this game. What are your thoughts on this offense with those guys in or out, and the precipitation as well?
Yeah, So far, Spencer Long, the center, is for sure ruled out. Trent Williams, their all-world left tackle, reportedly out. We're not expecting him to play. And Brandon Scherf, their right guard, is also expected to be out. Morgan Moses, their right tackle, is questionable, still could play. But we're looking at a minimum of 3 starting offensive linemen gone against the Cowboys defense that has played all right this year at full strength. Sean Lee will be out there. David Irving will be there in the middle. So definitely a slightly improved Cowboys D than we've seen. Redskins haven't been able to run the ball on anyone this season. You wouldn't think all those injuries on the O-line will help that. And we'll get Kirk Cousins throwing the ball all over the field again. I think it is worth mentioning that Cousins kind of brings this surprising rushing floor to the table, especially this season. So in a game where the over-under has been going down, obviously, which is a concern, but seems like the Redskins could be more inclined to air the ball out.
Yeah, this total has been dropping here. Adam Levitan's been tweeting about that. We can see that on the Vegas page here at Labs if you want to check out all of the line moves this morning. Probably due to the weather, the precipitation, we do see 82% chance. Not great. Matt, so this is really interesting spot here. Josh Stockton is a guy who's been getting some trendy love as a cash game guy, who probably would get some targets. He's 3-9 on DK. So the price, the opportunity is there. But with 3 linemen out in a game where this 82% chance of rain and not looking super great, I'm pretty scared. What are your thoughts on this offense?
Yeah, so just to add a little color to the line movement here. So the over-under has dropped by 5 points. So it's a pretty substantial move. But still 60% of the tickets have been on the over. So there's some sharp money that is just pummeling this line down.
Yeah.
So it's not good for the Redskins. This is a team that wants to throw the ball because they suck at running the ball. But with this weather, they're not going to be able to throw the ball as effectively as they want. So I think that makes Dotson a really risky cash game play.
Same. Yeah. No, he's super risky. I think if anything, maybe the route you want to go is maybe on Jordan Reed for some shorter intermediate passes in the middle, and then Chris Thompson. Like they just might have to just give him like 3-yard receptions just all day because like their line sucks with all these injuries and with the precipitation. Chris Thompson has a huge target floor in my opinion. Ian, what are your thoughts on him?
Oh, definitely love Chris Thompson. We hear Jay Gruden talk every week about how he's too small to handle a full load, but all we've seen are his touches kind of keep going up as he continues to prove he's really the best option in that backfield. I think he's not on the screen because Jordan Reed's their starter, but Vernon Davis is also still involved. We saw Jordan Reed play a season-high snaps from the slot this past week, so it seems like the Redskins have at least started to embrace the idea that Jordan Reed and Vernon Davis are 2 of their 4 top receivers. So they've gone out of their way to get them on the field more. Obviously, Vernon's not in play for cash due to his smaller role, but I mean, this is a guy who's towards the top of the league in 20-yard catches, so still has some explosiveness.
I totally like that. The Cowboys are super exploitable by tight ends.
Cool. All right. Get your questions in here in the chat. I got the chat up right here, monitoring those. We'll spend, 5-10 minutes on that after we go through just 2 more games here. No more injuries really that we need to discuss, but there are 2 games that have some precipitation issues that we'll just quickly talk on. The first one is this Atlanta Jets game. Matt, what are your thoughts on this game with the precipitation? Obviously, another high one, 83% in this game in New York. What does it do for your sort of idea of these offenses and how this game might play?
I think it means more handoffs for Taylor Gabriel. But on top of that, I think Julio Jones is already in a bad spot just historically in the Dan Quinn era. Hasn't been good as a favorite, hasn't been good on the road. So it's just a really negative spot for him. I could understand going more with the runners in this game as cash game options potentially, but I still think for cash even it's risky all the way around. But I do like some GPP exposure because I think these guys are going to have low ownership.
Yeah, I think Freeman is a particularly strong GPP play this week. Ian, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I agree with what Freeman said. Julio's capable of obviously toasting anyone, but we have seen Claiborne stand up some pretty good receivers and play well in shadow covers this season. Maybe another spot to look would be in the slot. The Jets are without Buster Skrine, who's been playing mostly slot corner for them this season, and we saw Sanu have a pretty large role last week coming back from that hamstring injury. So if he's a little bit healthier and more attention towards Julio, I'm sure we'll still get plenty of runs, but Sanu is that short to intermediate guy.
Cool. And then last game with some precipitation issues. The Raiders traveling cross country, playing in Buffalo today. Another high percentage of chance here at 82%. Cool. Yeah. So let's talk through this game. We do have Sharice Wright playing, Ian. So that is an injury thing that we have to take note of. What are your thoughts on this offense for both teams, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, you said it. We got Sharice right back. EJ Gaines is out. It's been out for a few days already. And recent news this morning was Jordan Poyer, their safety, is also out. So he's been one of the best safeties in the league this season. But now we get Amari Cooper, who apparently doesn't suck anymore, going up against Sharice Wright, who we saw get shredded at every turn last season. So, so, if we can get a spot where the 2 best secondary members of the Bills are out, definitely want to take a long look at Derek Carr and company.
Yeah, Matt, have we seen any movement on this one? It seems like the lines hasn't been quite as volatile on this one as it has been on some of these other games.
Yeah, this is actually a really sneaky spot. So for a lot of these precipitation games, the over-under has dropped. For this game, it's actually gone up. And I think it's gone up in part because we've gotten the confirmation of those injuries in the Bills secondary, which means that we could see some more explosive plays from the Oakland passing game. And then also Marshawn Lynch is out I think that actually helps the running game for the Oakland Raiders. So I think out of the precipitation games, this might be one of the better ones in a really sneaky way. So if you're going with the Bills, I'm still all on board with LaShawn McCoy.
Yeah, for sure. Look, McCoy. Do you guys have any strong takes on Richard versus Washington?
From what we've seen, because we had some data from last year too, where Latavius Murray was out, and we could just kind of see how the Raiders acted with just them. It's almost a near even touch split, but for the most part, Richard has been the more passing down back, and Washington has gotten the goal line carries this season. For what it's worth, Washington is basically the spark freak super athlete, and Richard has kind of been the overachiever with the better yards per carry. So should be even touches either way.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Ian said. It looks like even touches. One thing that is interesting, some of the sharper rankers at Fantasy Pros, and that would include Sean Corner, the odds maker. We've had him on the show before. A lot of those guys are preferring Richard to Washington, but it's still pretty close. So, I mean, for whatever that's worth.
In Richard, lower ownership projections as well. So maybe a good spot to gain some leverage on the field there. All right, let's take some user questions. It seems like we have so many questions on this situation. So let's hop over. Again, this game's not on DraftKings main slate, but people with the bike situation, people love some Juju. Friedman, what are your thoughts on Juju? He was only 5.5 on FanDuel, so obviously the price is nice. With no Martavis, obviously the role is expanded. What are your thoughts this matchup, though?
Well, the thing that's, I think, nice for him is that he has the opportunity now to move out of the slot and to start playing outside. And I think that gives him a better matchup because where the Lions have been the best right now is with Slay on the outside in shadow coverage, and then Diggs on the inside in the slot. He's had a pretty good season, but their other outside corner hasn't really been that good. So that gives Smith a pretty nice opportunity to go against the worst cover corner in that secondary. So a nice spot for him.
Yeah, Ian, what are your thoughts on Juju?
Yeah, all about it. Definitely good. He'll be getting some more snaps. We'll say these last 3 weeks, really ever since Pittsburgh went to Kansas City and got that win, we have seen them just really embrace Le'Veon Bell as the focal point of that offense, and most of the leftover targets have been going to Antonio Brown. So even with Juju sliding into that number 2 receiver role, I mean, Martavis Bryant was pissed off enough to leave for a reason. I mean, he hasn't been getting the ball much this year, so need to, I think, temper our expectations a little bit for how many targets Juju might be seeing. But yeah, I mean, it's still a good spot against Lawson, like Friedman was saying, and gotta love that price. So
yeah, cheap enough where it doesn't take much to pay off his value in cash games, at least. All right, let's move back to this Cincinnati game. You know, we talked about the receivers with Ross and AJ, and Dalton obviously going to be a pretty chalky play in all formats as well. But people really want to talk about Mixon. Obviously, we have this narrative of like he crushed in the first half, didn't get a touch in the second half, and complained about it, as people would do when they were dominating, didn't get a touch. And then Marvin Lewis calls him a baby or something. I don't even know. Something ridiculous. This, like, I hate getting into like narratives like this, but like his price and role and matchup is so good that like we sort of have to talk about it. Freeman, how are you approaching Mixon?
I like it. Again, I said this is one of the few games on the slate that has weather that's tolerable. And the line, the over-under for this has moved up. One of the few games throughout the week in which the line has moved up. The Bengals, they've consistently been getting the benefit of becoming bigger favorites. So they moved through the key number of 10. So now the spread is 11 points. I think this feels like more of a Mixon game, especially in the second half, than an AJ Green game. And it could be an AJ Green game. I mean, he's going to be popular, but I think if there is ever a spot for Mixon to break out, and if you think you're like on the Mixon truther side, this is the game you need to be invested in.
Fair enough. Let's hop over to this New Orleans Saints Chicago Bears game. This is a Coors Field fantasy football game in the Superdome in New Orleans. But it's an interesting matchup against the Chicago Bears team that just We saw last week with Trubisky, they just absolutely want to slow the ball down or slow the game down. They want to give a million touches to Jordan Howard and Tariq Cohen, and just, sort of like keep the spread or keep the total low. Ian, what are your thoughts on this game? Do you think there's a chance that the Bears could just make this super ugly and sort of win the time of possession battle here?
Yeah, so I was kind of thinking about that this week when we were looking at this game and this new Bears offense where they just want to run the ball for second and third downs and put the game in the hand of their defense. And it really hasn't affected the opposing offense in terms of a time of possession or pass attempts so far, because this Bears offense is terrible. They're running the ball a lot, but I mean, that's because they can't pass. Really no explosive plays to speak of. And if you look at their drive chart last week against the Panthers, I mean, they're punting in 3 plays almost every possession. So we've seen this defense for the last few years play much better in Chicago than they have anywhere else. I mean, Coors Field of fantasy football obviously speaks for itself. So, I mean, Jordan Howard's going to get fed again, but definitely I think a low ceiling on this offense in general. So maybe if they're playing from behind, we could see some more touches for Tariq Cohen this week.
Yeah, Freeman, you're the Superdome whisperer. What are your thoughts on this one?
So this game has been moving towards the under. One thing that's interesting is that the majority of the tickets, and you can see this information on our Vegas page, the majority of the tickets have come in for the Saints, but the spread has moved down. So there has been some sharp money to hit the Bears a little bit. That said, I mean, the Bears, I don't know. They've been covering basically based on luck for the majority of the season. If you look at their Vegas plus minus, it is barely positive, but they're 5-2 against the spread. So I don't think it's a great situation for them in general. They've gotten a lot of fluky touchdowns recently. I don't see it being a great spot for them. I think it's an Ingram and Kamara game in the Superdome.
Fair enough. Okay. Let's see here. This will be the last question. People were wondering about this game. This is a game that we talked about in the Flex podcast, Freeman, one that we were high on. Watson versus Wilson, and still a game that's projected for not like super high ownership, which I think is pretty intriguing here. Russell Wilson, at only 9 to 12%, even though it's like sort of the higher markup quarterbacks, but quarterbacks just don't get chalky. What are your thoughts on this game? Sort of like, is there any line movement that swayed you later in the week?
For me or Ian?
For you.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. So, what's interesting is that so earlier in the week, the line movement was positive. And then recently with the news of the Texans owner's comment, the line has actually moved down a little bit. Yeah. But again, this is one of the only games on the slate with some good weather, which is kind of rare for Seattle at this time of the year. But, you take what the fantasy gods give you. I still think this is going to be a pretty high-scoring game. And I think a high-scoring game in this situation would tend to favor the Texans. But I don't know. I don't mind stacking up on either side of this game.
Yeah, Ian, what are your thoughts on this game before we get out of here?
Yeah, I think just important thing from the Texans, I think offensive perspective is, people should be afraid of Sherman. He's a really good cornerback, but he sits on that left side of the field all game. So we've seen Will Fuller line up there most of the season. He's scored all these touchdowns on a real small number of targets. So if there's a game for maybe that streak to get wiped out, could be this one, but it's an opportunity for DeAndre Hopkins and at a reduced ownership to get a matchup against a third-round rookie cornerback for most of the game. So
Sorry, Ian, just to interrupt. Here's one thing that is to go off of what he said with Fuller. In the past, when we've seen Sherman get burned, sometimes it's been by those smaller, speedy wide receivers. So, like, it could be a game for touchdown regression for Fuller, but if there's a type of receiver who can beat Sherman, it is that guy who can just run by him.
Yeah, definitely. And then another kind of spot against this specific Seattle defense is Ryan Griffin. We've seen him just really become that number one tight end with CJ Fiodoritz out the whole season. So with Griffin potentially going up the middle, and Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor are obviously both ballers, but Seahawks have been exposed by tight ends a bit in the past. So could see some more Hopkins or Griffin just based on the Seahawks defense.
Cool. All right. We are going to end it there. Thank you guys for joining us. As always, good luck this week. I hope to see Fantasy Labs people at the top of the leaderboards as always. Good luck. We'll talk to you guys next week.